Today we have a special guest, and his name is Greg Hammond. If you already know, he's running for county commissioner. And so, we're just gonna see what his opinions are, what his vision is, and his motto is a new voice and a fresh vision. So we would like to hear some of your fresh visions for us.
How are you doing, Rainbow?
I'm doing good.
KT, how are you?
Doing great.
Now, KT knows this, but Rainbow, we're meeting for the first time. So now you got to be careful. My background's in journalism, so if we don't watch out, I'll end up asking all the questions.
Yeah, we'll try and keep it simple.
I appreciate that. Well, first of all, I want to thank Kelvin for keeping in contact with me. Kelvin was one of my former students at Southside High School. And so the fact that, he feels comfortable to continue to call me up several years later, I appreciate that, Kelvin, giving me this opportunity to visit with Peekaboo and crew. Peekaboo in the morning. So thank you for that. And this has allowed me to meet Professor Hagens, someone I have not met before. So
Also one of my former teachers.
so Kelvin, you're bringing people together. So kudos to Kelvin Douglas before we get any further.
That's one of my special talents.
So yes, I am running for county commission. The job of the county commission is multifaceted, but at the end of the day, they're going to determine the budget and they're going to set policy. Okay. I am a lifelong resident of Jackson, Tennessee, apart from 4 years I spent in Lexington, Kentucky, working in television there. So I've been back home from Kentucky for 10 years. That's the same amount of time I've been a teacher at Southside High School. I've seen our community make some progress, and I've seen some areas where our community has yet to grow. And so I want to be a part of that growth that needs to happen.
Okay, cool. So one question I have for you is, I've seen a lot of renovations and new buildings coming up in downtown Jackson, but it seems like it's not a lot of us moving in, and it's more of white people, young white couples moving in. So what are we doing to ensure that the people that were moved out,
right,
they're not misplaced,
right?
And are we giving them benefits or something of that sort?
Okay.
To them?
Rainbow, this is a great question. I have a brother who lives in Nashville, and the term for that is gentrification.
Yes. Gentrification.
If you're listening at home or in the car, pull over and Google gentrification.
Yeah, we had a discussion about gentrification.
Right. And so, so Rainbow, let's look at this from all sides. Does Jackson and Madison County benefit when downtown makes progress? Yes, overwhelmingly, yes, okay? Now, you did bring up some good points. So, for example, let's put a face on what she's talking about. And Rainbow, what you're talking about has a wider, I think, a wider circle than just downtown.
It is, you're right. Correct.
So, for example, I've been out in my district, meeting people, passing out my cards. I'm putting up campaign signs today, so obviously I want to make relationships before I ask you to let me put my sign in the ground. So there was one gentleman who was talking about the YMCA closing down. Okay, and when you think about this issue that Rainbow just brought up, there is some socioeconomic implications in this. So, for example, the lift is a beautiful place. Okay. But when you think about it, if you just sit back, right, and just look at the facts, there were some folks who would use the YMCA that don't feel comfortable or can't afford the lift. And so we need to talk about this and then figure out, okay, so if the lift is not an option for some of the people in our community, because not everyone is of the same socioeconomic class, right? There are some things that I can afford now as an adult that my family couldn't afford back in the 80s when I was growing up and we had 5 kids, right? The economics were different.
Is there a community center in Jackson? Because I'm new to
Rainbow. Rainbow, were you following me yesterday? And I say this because I visited a family. I was walking around not far from Lane College because Lane College is in my district.
Okay.
So I was having a conversation. There were 4 or 5 guys. Most of them were 68 and up. Mm-hmm. They were mostly older men, but there was a young man that was on the porch with them. Oh. And so when I hand my card out, I always ask people, do you have any questions for me? Because if you don't go there, a lot of people will just take your card and they'll walk off. Right. But we don't benefit if we don't have a conversation. That's true. So this young man, among a group of older men, said something to the effect where he said something, it would be nice if all the churches, he lives in East Jackson, and he's an African American. Okay. So from the perspective he was speaking of was an African American and African American churches. What if all the churches got together, bought the YMCA, and made it a community center?
That's good.
Now listen. Wait a minute. Now, it may sound pie in the sky, but progress is made through conversations like that, right? He's a young man and he's still willing to dream. I was like, what? It kind of blew my mind because I live very close to the YMCA, but the fact or the thought of the YMCA either being taken over by local government or local churches, that's not something I really thought about. So here's this young man who presented this idea. He saw a need, right? From his standpoint, he doesn't fit the socioeconomic mold to be able to afford the lift. That's just where he's coming from, right? And he felt comfortable with the YMCA. Now the YMCA shut down for a number of reasons, but I think if you look at supply and demand and competition, I think the lift may have been a part of that. And so there are, Professor Hagens is from Cleveland, right? Rainbow, you're from Oklahoma.
And I'm from here.
I'm from a lot of places.
Okay, and so some of the bigger towns have municipal community centers.
Well, I grew up at the Y.
Right.
I grew up going to the Y, just after school, learning to dance classes. After school, we had to do something. Right. So we spent time at the Y.
Right. Well, the Y is no longer there, but the building is there. So the idea is, why don't we as a community do something with that building to meet a need? So what I'm saying is, the idea to just have the conversation, the idea of the brainstorm, the idea or the willingness to see a problem, have a conversation and try to meet a need, that's what we need more of. Right. And I think when we get younger and engaged leaders, you'll get that. Now, I think the YMCA, I think they want $900,000, I think, for it. So obviously, there would be some things you really need to consider and look at the pros and cons to see if it's even something that can happen. But the fact that that young man had that idea in that conversation, I think is very positive, and that's how you move forward. Even if that's not an option, that was a conversation that was brought up. He saw a problem, and he's spitballing ideas to meet the need. And I think we need more of that.
Yeah, I totally agree. I have another question.
Yes, Rainbow.
So yesterday I got something to eat, right?
Okay.
And of course there's the state tax, right?
Right.
But I also saw a county tax.
Oh, you did?
Yes. What does that mean?
Well, Rainbow, I would, if you could check out the Tennessee Comptroller's office to find out the definitive statement or the reason behind those. But as you know, taxes help us pay for stuff, right? Taxes help us pay for our roads, okay, our schools. And another conversation we need to have, everybody is willing to put something on the wish list, but are we willing to do what it takes to get these things? So for example, there was a conversation recently among the county commission and other government entities about if we're going to raise taxes to get more money, how are we going to do it? Do we want a wheel tax or do we want to raise property tax? Some people were against the wheel tax because they said, well, people of lower incomes would suffer having to pay more with this wheel tax. Okay.
Now, what's will tax? What's the difference?
So let's say you live in an apartment building, okay? You don't own a house, but you do drive a car.
Okay.
And yearly you have to go get your tags, right?
Right.
And so if there was an increase of that fee, and that increase was used to say build a new school or improve some roads or in the case of the Titans 20-something years ago, to build a stadium, right? Those kind of taxes go there. And so what we have to think about, are we willing to pay more to get more? Now, a lot of people hate the idea of taxes being raised. But if we have old leaky buildings for high schools, what are our options?
Right.
And so I think no matter what socioeconomic scale you're on, if you're a member of the community, you're going to, don't be surprised if you're asked to chip in. I think that's something, whether it's the county tax on your receipt or a will tax, if there is one in the next couple of years, right? Or property taxes, you got to pay more to get more. So Rainbow, I guess that's kind of maybe to answer your question.
Yeah, it is.
But,
it is.
Like you said, people don't like having to hire their taxes.
Right.
And some people don't even like paying taxes in general.
Right.
So, we've always been facing that situation.
Yes.
What do you think is the solution, towards getting the people to chip in more to, build property?
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of people say that, they usually have to spend their taxes on welfare and,
right.
For people, that they don't want to spend it on. But
First of all, before I continue, I think this is cool that, how old are you, Kelvin?
22.
Rainbow, how old are you? 20. We're having serious adult conversations with young people. And this is great, okay? You guys are learning. I'm being challenged as an adult and a potential public servant. I love that we're here, and I hope this is not the only time I get invited. Kelvin, to answer your question, let's look at it this way. There are 25 commissioners, okay? Madison County commissioners. A lot of these men and women have run under the premise that we're not going to raise taxes. Elect me because we're not going to raise taxes. However, what are the current conditions of some of our school buildings? I don't know if you've been around, but the current condition of many of our school buildings are that they're old and they're leaky. And right now, some of the ideas that are being tossed around by some of our current leaders, as far as our vision for the school system, some of those visions and plans and ideas don't address some of our oldest buildings. Now, I'm going to tell you a story that some people who follow me have already heard. This may be new to you. Kelvin, as you know, I do some work for 101.5 doing play-by-play for football and basketball. And Rainbow, this story will be new to you. It'll be old to others, but I'm telling it to you because we're meeting for the first time. So I'm at a local high school, Northside High School, okay? So local public high school here in Madison County. I'm covering a game for one of the local radio stations. I go to use the restroom at this gymnasium at this high school. There is a bucket catching water in the entrance of this bathroom, okay? Well, and I think to myself, okay, the roof leaking, no big deal, okay. I go in the restroom, and as I approach the toilet, there is a bucket catching water. And I say to myself, okay, this is bad.
Yeah.
Okay, that's one of our oldest high schools, and the conversation right now about improving our school system and the money we're going to spend. Some of those conversations don't even address some of our older buildings. Now, I submit to you, one of the reasons why our infrastructure, when it comes to our schools, is behind is because, one, you have a generation of leaders who are disconnected from the school system, one, because of age, and two, their kids don't attend public school, okay? And I'm going to use an analogy. I grew up in church. I'm a Christian. I go to church. Jesus used parables and analogies. Let me use one. Let's say Kelvin was given permission to oversee a tomato plant, okay? How much time and effort will Kelvin put into this tomato plant if his kids were going to eat those tomatoes? Compared to the time and effort if Kelvin didn't even need those tomatoes. Kelvin's not going to use the tomatoes from that plant, right? Kelvin's eating oranges in another garden. So I'm going to ask you, how much time, effort, commitment care is Kelvin going to put in this tomato plant if his kids aren't eating these tomatoes? Okay.
To be fair.
So do you guys kind of get the parallel I'm making? So you have a group of leaders who are, one, just older in age. They don't have school age kids, so they're not really connected. And then two, Rainbow, I don't know how long you've been in Jackson-Madison County, but we essentially have two school systems. We have a public school system. We have a private school system.
I've heard there's a lot of
Yeah,
private
African Americans are the majority in the public school system here, although we're not the majority in the county. Okay, African Americans make up 60, and during a commercial break I'll look up the official numbers, but African Americans make up about 65% of the students here in the public school system, but we don't make up the majority in the county. Okay, so you wonder, okay, if you read the numbers and you get down to the nitty gritty, what do those numbers mean? What can we read from those numbers? Well, I think what you read is what we have. We have old leaky buildings and leaders who are disconnected to the public school system. So it is up to other people in the community, whether I get elected or not, to say, to care, to see there is a need, and to step up and offer themselves up for positions of leadership.
Yeah. Yeah.
To be fair, I probably would procrastinate and not put that much time in the tomato.
Kelvin may not even like tomatoes.
You know what? I was thinking the same thing about KT.
Kelvin didn't even think Kelvin liked tomatoes.
Go on my lazy butt.
All right.
Okay, so back to the commissioner, Mr. Hammond.
I'm running for commission.
Well,
So I'll need your help.
Let's speak into existence.
If you're in District 5 and you're old enough to vote, I need your votes. KT lives in my district because I already checked the voter registration list, so I need KT's vote.
Okay.
And my family will be behind you too.
Hey, now Rainbow, we can get you registered. If you live in this area, we can get you registered.
I think I'm already.
It's easy. It's easy to register online. Okay. Looking at you over there, Reggie. If you live here, we can get you registered.
One of the things that I'm looking at on your website is...
by the way, my website is electgreghammond.org.
Yes. The county commission's plan is to spend upwards of $20 million to increase the size of the Madison County Jail.
Okay.
And it's met with concerns with some of the citizens of District 5.
All right.
Mostly because the research has shown that they sentence more blacks than whites.
Okay.
So if you're elected, what is your plan to tackle that issue?
First of all, let me preface my answer by saying, in case there are people who don't understand why we're talking about race this morning, District 5, a large portion of District 5 is in East Jackson. And District 5, I want to say, is 70% or more African American. And again, those numbers are on my website if you want to check it out. So a lot of the concerns of the African American community are things I need to think about and know about. So that's why Kelvin has asked me this question. Yes, Kelvin, and I think another reason why the concern is people realize the status of our school buildings and the fact that our county went 2 decades without raising taxes because that was their campaign push. We're not going to raise taxes. And so when you don't do that, it has an impact. No matter what your age is or where you go to school, there's an impact. So when people hear you're going to spend money over here for a jail, but won't put time and effort necessarily and funds into public education, then that's where you get that conflict.
Yes, because they shut down the Jackson Central Mary High building.
They did, and we now know that wasn't the best idea because we have overcrowding in our other schools now. Liberty, to be exact. Which, by the way, this is why it's important for people to engage, okay? For people to have conversations at your kitchen tables, not necessarily on Facebook necessarily, because a lot of people don't know how to act and they like to argue. But, go out to lunch, have conversations with your friends, but also have conversations with people who y'all don't see eye to eye, right? I'm running as independent. I've had lunch with several Republicans. I've had lunch with several Democrats, right? Because one, these are the people making decisions, and you need to know everybody's point of view because everybody's in your community. And you may not be able to meet eye to eye on everything, but there are some places where you all can come to an agreement.